Kristen, can you hear us now?
Okay.
All right, we are back. Sorry about that. For folks who are watching online, thanks for your patience as well, and hopefully you can hear us, and we're checking that to make sure that that is a true thing. You know, technology is great. Boy, when it doesn't work, it is not great. So anyway, thank you for your patience. As I was saying, we are delighted to have Jamie Fitzgerald, who is the Polk County Auditor obviously of the largest county in Iowa, has been auditor since 2007 and has done a whole lot of work of upgrading that office, digitalizing and using technology for that office, and to make sure that we have fair elections. But what we really want to talk about are the changes in the law that have happened over the last few years. And Jamie's going to update us on that, what you can do, what you can't do, how you can help your neighbor, can't, all of those things. We usually have the presenter talk for about 20-25 minutes. And then we'll open it to questions, and Jamie will be able to answer every single question, I am quite sure. So thank you so much for being with us, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, so you're going to hear the same speech you've heard before. But we've had a lot of changes in election law. It seems like the only thing we do every year in the legislature is change election law. We keep moving the goalposts, making it difficult for people to vote. And a lot of these changes were enacted in 2021. Now, you know, say, well, that's a year and a half ago. But one of the bills was introduced, passed both chambers, and had a public hearing in 6 days. So when you start doing legislation like that, and I'm not talking at the end of the session, I'm talking in the beginning of session, it's pretty unheard of. We had county auditors, both rural and urban, Democrat, Republican, talk about the bill. And no one talked about it in a good way. Because we're the people on the front lines that when the voters have problems, we're the ones they call. They don't call their legislator, they don't call their congressperson, they don't call the president, they all call us. And so we've taken an active role in attempting to get in front of these. Now, any of you that have worked with the legislation the last few years understand that they really don't care. They don't care about your opinion. So, in hurrying this bill along, they had, this bill was about 29 pages, 74 sections. And this is the first of two bills they passed. It was a pretty big bill, changing a lot of things. One of the first things they did was inactivate voters. And usually, in Connie and some of the other folks that have been lobbying, Michael, will tell you that when legislation's passed, if they want it to go retroactive, they say retroactive. They do a lot for the taxes. This is retroactive to this date. Nowhere in this bill had a retroactivity. But the Secretary of State took one portion of it and said, the portion said, if you didn't vote in the general election, you'll be made inactive. And they went through, within a month of the bill being passed, and made 294,000 Iowans inactive. Now, to be fair, some of these folks have moved. People move apartments, people move houses. The last thing you think of doing is changing your registration. So some of these were legitimate. However, there are about 417-year-olds that were inactivated. And the Secretary of State has been very upfront about getting people registered to vote, getting these young people registered to vote. So the first thing they got from government was, hey, you're now inactive for an election you couldn't have voted in anyway. So in another move the legislature did in 2021, the second election bill clarified that you can't do that to 17-year-olds that are uneligible. So when you speed things through the legislature and you speed them through the committees, this is what you get. And so those 400, we had over 100 here in Polk County, and we did try to reach out to all of them. There were a few we couldn't get, but when we celebrate that they're getting the Carrie Chapman Cat Award, which is if you get 90% of your high school class registered, you get an award from the Secretary of State. However, these folks were inactivated, and I'll tell you, they were upset, and that was upset were, we had about 40 people that were deceased on our rolls that we had taken off our rolls. But when the Secretary of State pulled the list, they pulled a prior list. So these folks, their spouses were getting letters saying, you're now inactive. Well, they'd already told us their spouse had passed away. So that was, it was a Lazarus type move, but folks didn't really appreciate that. And they called us, so they can't do that anymore either. But this law changed almost everything about voting. I mean, I'll go through a couple different areas. I can't physically go through all of them. Like the stuff that doesn't matter is the county auditor being fined for not following the law up to $10,000. No one cares about that. We all follow the law. That's how that works. But they did change a lot of absentees. And we've had a number of elections in Polk County since the bill passed. But, you know, how many, you know, I see some folks from Mitchellville and that had special elections. A lot of us haven't had that opportunity to have a special election. The only election we've actually had between that, the bill passing and being enacted, and voting is the city election. And city elections are not a very high turnout. But the thing that worries me is the problems we're seeing. If you vote in the city election and you vote in special elections, you are dialed in. You are not the casual voter. You are paying attention to everything. And we have people struggling with the laws that way. As we get in, same with the primary. The primary is a family fight. Democrats, Republicans, Republicans. And you can switch parties, yeah, but not a lot of people do that. But you, again, are very dialed in. So these changes are going to affect people in a negative manner. The first thing they did was eliminate how many days you had to request a ballot. 5 years ago, we made a tickler file. If you were a snowbird and you wanted to vote in any of the given elections, you just fill out an absentee ballot request form. We put in a tickler file. They took that away a few years ago, had to be 120 days. Well, in 2021, they decided to take 50 more days off that, so it's 70 days. So the first day you can request a ballot for the general election is August 30th. If you submit your ballot request to our office prior to August 30th, we have to send it back to you with a notification we can't accept it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. We had a lot of college students very upset, and I was just at an event in Urbandale where it got brought up. I'm going to college. Can I just drop this off and sign it? No, you have to mail it from your college address to us. We'll mail you a ballot. So this, the dropping of 50 days. It's the filling out the form perfectly. Now, I'm sure everyone here drove. A few of you probably don't have a driver's license. You've got a voter PIN card. If you have a driver's license, you more than likely don't have a PIN card. The PIN card are for those that don't have a driver's license. Now, you can call and request one, but I can't mass produce them. There's no way in our system for me to mass produce the PIN card. We've asked repeatedly, the legislature, let's just get rid of the voter registration card. The card I send you if you have a driver's license, you can use it to get the driver's license, but you can't use it to vote. It makes absolutely no sense. So we ask every year to get rid of the two cards into one. It's confusing. And the Secretary of State has done a better job with explaining what the PIN card is and what it's not. But the problem is, when you fill out your absentee ballot request form and you start guessing, and trust me, we've had hundreds of people guess already. It's not your favorite 4 digits, it's not your social security number, it's not anything to do with your phone number, it's just a randomized number. And I argue it's not even that special. I share mine with 39 individuals in Polk County. So, and if you told me, can you give us your PIN number? I don't even know what it is. So, when you're doing your absentee ballot request, please use your driver's license. If you're nervous about security, and ARP makes, you know, those of us that are in ARP, they say don't give that number out. Well, then put it in an envelope and mail it to our office. So the other thing that they changed in 2021 that was actually the newest thing was you have to date it. If your request isn't dated, we can't accept it. So you're going through and everything on the absentee ballot request form, your name, your driver's license, your date of birth, where you want the ballot sent, everything's required. So we used to have asterisks, we used to have the highlight, and we still do that online. But you have to date it, and you'd be surprised how people don't date things. So what the law is, and this is probably one of the good parts of the law, is our office will contact you. And that's why we look for the phone numbers and we look for the email addresses. Because it's so much simpler for us to call or email you and ask you a couple of secret questions, which aren't really that secret because they're not Iowa code. But we'll call and ask you those questions. That's why we always ask for your email and your phone number. Now, there is a box you can check on the side of the form that won't add it to the voter list. Anyone that's given your number once to any political party or your email address, everyone has it, except me. So we ask you to put that in case there is a problem. We get a hold of you. So we're required by law to contact the voter within 24 hours. Now, 24 hours isn't you're getting the letter in 24, we have to mail it within 24 hours. So then you start getting into the deadlines that change. So as we get forward, you can only request a ballot 7 days in advance. But we start mailing ballots and start voting early 20 days in advance. In 2017, we voted 40 days in advance. Then they changed it down to 29 days. Now it's 20. That's, they can change the dates. I mean, we used to have one of the more progressive ways. Now we are pretty restrictive. But they're not just changing it on the front end, they're changing on the back end as well. So that 40 days, we stopped mailing ballots 3 days before the election. Then they changed it to 29 and 10. So we started voting 29 days in advance, mailing the ballots, stopped doing it 10 days in advance. The new law after 2021 is we start mailing ballots 20 days in advance, and we stop mailing 15 days in advance. So we start on a Wednesday. 20 days is always a Wednesday, and 15 days is always a Monday. So, we're not usually open on that Saturday or Sunday. So we're mailing ballots for 4 business days. So as we get farther into the process, you really have to pay attention if you're helping people vote. If you're helping them get an absentee ballot, that they fill everything out right. Because as you get to that deadline, it gets harder and harder for our staff to contact you. So we do send letters out, but the letters, instead of getting a ballot, you think, hey, the ballot's on the way, you're going to get that letter from us saying you're missing something. Or even worse, what you're getting now is you missed the deadline. So the deadline hasn't been very, we did quite a bit on media, but you have to realize you guys are all dialed in. You're here. 99% of the people aren't dialed in to what the new law is. So just looking at the effects of the 15-day cutoff. So if it was back to the 10-day cutoff for general and primaries, 162 of your peers would have got their ballots. Instead, they got 11. They missed that deadline either by a day or by 4 days. So 162 people. Hey, that's not a big deal, you say. Well, that's great. But almost 60% of those people didn't vote at all. So they're asking for a ballot not because they just want to make it easy on themselves or they think it's easier to just do it there. They're doing it because a lot of them have mobility issues and a lot of the young people were in college. We looked through all of them. In the city and school election that we just had, again, a low turnout. It was in November of 2021. So the bill had been in effect for about 8 months. 193 people missed the deadline. So again, not that big. Well, you start having close election, now it's a bigger deal. Yeah. And you have to remember, this bill was enacted after the highest turnout we've ever had in the history of Iowa in 2020. We had over 1 million people vote absentee. 72% of all Democrats voted absentee, and 52% of all Republicans voted absentee. So, and we had a 6 vote congressional race. And we were like the Maytag repairman. So these bills were being passed after probably the most successful election in Iowa history, not just in Polk County, but throughout the state. And even looking at the March election, 2021, they had Mitchellville was part of that, and Ankeny, which had a very short a very small margin of victory. 112 people missed the deadline of getting a ballot, and 2/3 of them didn't vote. So when you start talking about small margins of victory, you start talking about misinformation, you start talking about disinformation, this, folks, is what's happening. If you miss the deadline, roughly half the people aren't going to vote. And I'm here to tell you, it's just not the Democrats. It's all segments. But it affects the older generation a little bit more. We track everything, and they're missing, and they're not going to the polls. In the city school election, a friend of mine called. We had a military veteran. She was disabled. She got the letter. Of course, she calls upset with us. It's just the law. Somebody brought her to our office and did curbside voting. But you can't keep doing that for people. Somebody has to know the laws. And so what I'm asking you is, if you have a group, to let me come speak to you. If you have questions, call our office. Don't take them to Facebook, don't take them to Twitter. Right? Call us. We're happy to help. You know, there's so much misinformation out there. Now, getting back to the 2021 law change, they also changed something that they all agreed on a few years earlier. So we had a very close election in Northeast Iowa, and there were some ballots in question. The old law used to be, you had to have a postmark. The post office has to stamp your postmark. It has to be postmarked Monday before. Very close election in Northeast Iowa. The Republicans and Democrats agreed that going forward, we're going to have the bar scan, what they call the intelligent mail. So that's not free. So we spread it on all our envelopes, about 2 cents per envelope, to make sure that when your ballot came back, that we could ensure that your ballot, if it was put in the mail on Monday, would be received. That changed the game. So that lasted only 2 years. So now we have what's called sure count. And sure count means your ballot has to be into our office by the close of the polls. So the one thing I always tell people, look at your mail on Tuesdays. This is no knock against the postal union or the post office, but your Tuesday mail is always your lowest day. And surprise, it's ours also. But we work with the postmaster. Actually, the postmaster we work with is in Sioux Falls. And so we spend a lot of time on the phone to our local folks and looking for ballots. So the U.S. Post Office in Des Moines, we're a sorting center. So we get treated a little bit better than other people. All our mail doesn't go out anywhere else. So if you're in a rural town, a rural community, you mail your ballot, it either goes to Waterloo, Des Moines, or maybe Sioux City, and back. So you can mail it in Shenandoah, and it goes either to Omaha or some other place to be sorted, and then mail it back. So for us, we haven't had that issue, but we've been very proactive. The last ballot we got on election night in the primary was 7:55. A postman walked in a ballot. So that's one. The way we look at it is one less call that I have to take of somebody being very angry. I don't know what party they were, and I really don't care. I just want their ballot to count, their voice to be heard. But other counties didn't have that success. So we had one ballot that arrived after the election that would have counted. One ballot. In Clinton County, which is far smaller, it's on the eastern seaboard, they had 42 ballots that would have counted that came in after the deadline. They had a Republican supervisor district, 7 vote difference. 23 Republican ballots. Could have made the difference, might not have. But Northwest Iowa, same thing. They had a lot more that didn't count than we did. Because we've seen it. We understand what the law is. A lot of these folks haven't had special elections. And they don't have absentees like we have, where, you know, it's just a lot of people. You know, we have roughly 326,000 registered voters. That's a pretty good sized number compared to a lot of counties. We're by far the biggest. We're actually double the next size. So these laws do have an effect. They also changed who can take your ballot in for you. So I can have my neighbor, who I may or may not know well, go pick up my prescription at Walgreens. But under very few circumstances can you take my ballot in for me. So the following people can bring your ballot into the office for you or deliver it. Yourself, the voter. Somebody lives in your household. Somebody you're related to up to 4th degree, which is great-great-grandma, first cousins. Or a delivery agent. Now, there are special circumstances if you're in assisted living and you signed up with the state. We can actually send people from my office to go do it, and we do that. But the delivery agent wasn't defined with the first bill, it was defined with the second bill. So during the discussion of the first bill in 2021, the Democrats were promised that they would work with them on some of the election law, that the absentee on who can do what. So the second bill, which was House File 568, came, and they defined what a delivery agent was. So they didn't define who it was, they defined who it wasn't. So a delivery agent isn't, I just want to make sure I get your employer or an agent of your employer, implied or otherwise, an officer or an agent of your officer's union, or an actual or implied agent of a political party, campaign, or issue.
Oh.
So I'm not sure who's left. But they've made it a little more difficult. However, I don't know who lives at your house.
Right.
I don't know anyone that knows everyone that lives at your house or who you're related. So that makes it a little more dicey in terms of who can do what. Now, they also allowed to have.
Who asks? Who asks?
Just give me one, let me get. So they also allowed a drop box. So we've never had a drop box. Anyone that's been to our office, I know Rosie and Polly have been there, Valerie's been there. We're in the district that they used to put the chain link fences around in the bars. That's where we're at. We're on the edge of that. So putting a mailbox out there for your absentee ballot to have the weekend with it isn't going to make it. So we spent, I'm embarrassed to say how long we spent doing this, but we finally got a drop box in our office that is actually internal. So it's internalized in our office as an outside, it says absentee ballot box. For those of you around for the generic beer, it looks just like that sign. Absentee ballot drop box. But it can only be open for 20 days. And it can only be used to pick up ballots. So you can't drop in absentee ballot requests or voter registration. It's just for the drop box. So, and we have to check them 4 times a day, including on weekends. So we did utilize that for the primary, and it was pretty successful. We also we're required to have 24-hour recordable camera. So we have 4 of them around the building. And they're not the grainy type of versions that you see when somebody robs a bank. These are actually expensive versions where we can see your icon. But we have that available, and a lot of people did use that. But we can only have 1. So we have 326,000 voters. 1. So if you live in Ankeny, or you're like, well, you live in Mitchellville, you live in Alleman, you're driving downtown. And we also have the farmer's market, which is very successful. So we also have that, if you come down on a Saturday morning, just know the farmer's market is probably being held as well. But we did use it. We're not required to use it. We did ask for additional ones. Lynn County actually is moving something forward, seeing if they can have additional ones. We're not very likely. Looking at the Wisconsin law that just got knocked down, where they're not even required to use drop boxes. So we watch what a lot of other states are doing, because that's usually a precursor to what's happening for us. Now, when you come down to our office, they also change how you vote there. So now you're going to have to fill out the form like you would for an absentee ballot to be mailed to you. You have to do that prior to coming in. So we have a table out front where you can fill out the information. Then you have to come show an ID as well. Now, all 99 counties did the same thing prior to this. So this isn't a partisan issue at all. This is, we have a system that's set up, and you would come show us your ID. We would print out stickers, because I'm sure everybody here's handwriting is better than mine, but I have handwriting that looks like I should be a doctor. You can't see if it's a 3, a Z, a Q. My handwriting is awful. Absolutely awful. So we use stickers. Every county, they outlaw that, even though the system prints stickers anyway. So if you vote early in our office, you'll see us put the sticker on the back of your request, but you have to fill it out all by yourself on your own. You can't say, hey, I don't have my driver's license. Can you spot me some numbers? You have to fill it all out on your own. And that's going to cause a lot. We had small lines during the primary, but even during COVID in 2020, we had lines that went around the building. And we're going to have that again. There's really no way to prevent that for us. We are looking at expanded hours, but expanded hours are just going to have the line go a little bit longer. So we understand that's a problem. They also changed satellite voting. For those that have been around Polk County long enough, you know I do 15 of them. We do 15. They might in your neighborhood. They may be a senior center. They may be a library, or they might be something that's close to that.
Northwest Community Center.
Northwest Community Center is a perfect example. However, they took that away from me. They thought they were benefiting a party by doing that. Here's a little spoiler for everybody. I worked with both parties. I said, here's where I'm going to do them. Do you want me to do them somewhere else? Because just let me know. If you have a better spot, I'm happy to do it. So now they have to be petitioned. And that's going to cause a huge issue. Because you're going to have everyone think that they have a great idea. And that's fine. But there's going to be Monday, Tuesdays, there's going to be weekdays. Because you just can't do them all with the staffing level we have. We're going to try to do as many multiple days as we can. But if we get 50 to 60, it's going to be a lot of weekdays. And that's, unfortunately, that's just the way it is. We assume we're going to get 50 to 60. We're already planning for that. We're asking groups to look at where we used to have them, talk to those people, like the libraries, see if you can get in there. We're asking for that. We get other people are going to decide to go somewhere else. We're going to honor those. The one thing you have to have, if you're going to go do it, talk to the person ahead of time that owns the building. Make sure it's free, make sure it's handicap accessible. And make sure that you request the dates. You can't, with us, you can't request a date. You're going to get a date assigned. But if we, like I said, if we have 50 to 60, then we're going to have problems. If we have 15, we're going to be running downhill. But we just, we're preparing for the 50. So some folks will be upset they get Mondays and Tuesdays during the day, but we also have a budget to run, and this isn't a 24-hour drive-through. We have curbside voting still, so if you go to a satellite, if you come to our office, if you go to your polling site, you can call a number, and we will give you, have 2 people come out and curbside vote. So they also took, I'm going to try to wrap up so we can get questions. They also took an hour away of voting on election day. So now it used to be cities and schools closed at 8, primaries and generals closed at 9. And, they said, well, it's only an hour. Well, that's great, it's only an hour, but 1,300 people voted between 8 and 9 in 2020 during the pandemic. 1,300, Polk County alone. So that's going to catch people. And, that's just the unfortunate part of how this works. They also change, and it's going to affect the rural areas more, it's going to affect the urban areas. It used to be if you worked the entire shift, the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. shift, say you're at Maytag, you were required by law to get 3 hours off to go vote, to come vote, and then go back to work. That law is now changed to 2 hours. So that's, in Polk County, you can get anywhere in about 45 minutes, from point to point. But if you're a rural person in, say, Adams County, and you work in Newton, you're going to really have to hump it to get that 2 hours, hour there, hour back to vote. So that's something they kind of passed and no one talks about. Now, they did do some good things. I don't want to say this bill is the worst thing ever. They did do some good things. You're now required to be notified if we change your polling site. So no longer will you go to your old polling site and see a placard saying, oh, you don't vote here, you vote here. You'll be getting a card when we change polling sites. So that's a good thing. Us sending you a letter if something's wrong with your absentee ballot request or contacting you, that's a good thing. And in 2024, the Secretary of State's office is going to be required to have that on their website. So when you go in to check if you're registered to vote, And the one thing we always say, if your name's Mary Beth, try Mary slash, space Beth, try a couple different ways. But you can look right now to see if you're registered to vote, and you'll be able to look to see in 2024 if your absentee ballot request has a problem. So as we look in the future, I was telling my friend a little bit ago that I belong to a national organization. We, Democrats, Republicans, urban, rural, national. So we always talk, and I just got back from Houston a couple months ago, and I watched what happened to the Texas legislation. And what that requires is you put your driver's license number on your absentee ballot as well. But their law is a little more stringent than they were proposing here. If you use that PIN number that no one knows, then you have to use that PIN number again on your absentee ballot. And so it would require us to get another envelope. And the way we set up our envelopes, we do it to be the cost effective as we can. We weight them. We know what the cheapest rate we can get under first class bids for supply are. We're there. We're at the cheapest we can get. Now, the one thing that I'm going to make complaints about again is the secrecy envelope. It's a sleeve. It's required to have an envelope on there, but it's a sleeve. It will not shut. So when you get it, please don't call, or don't go to Facebook first. Call first, but it is a sleeve, and there is an envelope shortage, which I think is the only reason this bill didn't pass, to put your driver's license number on your request. Do we think it's coming again? We do. There are other things coming. The constitutional amendment on the Second Amendment, that'll be on the ballot this year, and it has to be summarized. So it's only about two sentences already. So I don't know how the Secretary is going to summarize it. That's up to them. With that, I think I've covered a lot of the high points. They did change some of the nomination petitions. We heard a lot about that. Yeah. On how many people need to sign it. We heard a lot about that for that. We've heard a little bit about auditors going to jail or being fined. We heard some of that. But those are things that affect candidates in campaigns. You know, I want to talk about things that affect real people. And I understand people want to help everyone here. Polly's done a good job, Rosie. They do it quite a bit, Claire, in Eastern Polk County, where they help folks. Now, what you can do to help folks is to make sure that if you're going to help them get an absentee ballot, that it's filled out right. Bring it to our office to have us contact them is going to delay the process. So if they don't trust you, they should put it on. They should mail it to our office. Now, we check the mail all the time. We constantly are checking the stress levels of the mail. It's about 2 days. From my house, I live about 5 miles from my office. It's about 2 days to get from my house to my office. So don't put that in the office, and we'll start talking about it during the election. But as we get to deadlines, don't put it in the mail. We're going to have you try to get it to our office. And if you're a campaign or if you're helping people, you have 3 days to get your absentee ballot requests that you touch into my office. There's no more sandbagging them. They did that years ago where campaigns would just hold on to them, the request to the last day or the ballot to the last day. That doesn't work that way anymore. The requests have 72 hours. If you get Friday, you get it to us Monday. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, comments, or concerns. Mike?
Hold on a second. First, thank you, Jamie. Just belong to somebody. I know, I should try, right? Yeah. And then I will bring the microphone around to folks so everybody can hear.
Mike could be first. Oh, anyway. Jamie, so glad to see you. Thanks for coming. I read a lot of articles in the news outlets about a movement to replace some of the auditors and secretaries of state with particular people who have a particular political bent. But also there's a worry about security at the polling places because there might be some people who come in and harass and so on. Have you heard anything about that and what are you planning on doing about that?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Mike. We have heard about it. We've seen some of it. For those that go back to that March special election, we had my staff found a pipeline Now, the pipe bomb wasn't intended for the election office. It was on a trail. It was thrown in the snow, but it was still a live pipe bomb. We got national news on that. That wasn't our goal. We don't see the level of angst and anger that you see in some of the bigger communities like Philadelphia, Phoenix, where there are threats, or Georgia, where these 4 individuals had to testify. We don't see a lot of that. But if there's a problem at our polling sites, we are going to address it. We have a coup plan, which is a continual operation that we use for the pipe bomb, you know, even though it wasn't directed at us. But we also use those for poll workers. So if a poll worker feels threatened, we have staff we're going to send out there. And there are laws about campaigning close to the polling site. There are also laws about, you know, you can't wear your vote for this person all day and poll watch. You can go in and vote and come back out. We haven't seen the amount of angst in other places. We have elections for our auditors and Secretary of State. Some places appoint. And those appointments get scrutinized pretty closely. And these aren't your neighbors a lot of times. They're professionals that go from one state to the other that run elections. Luckily in Iowa, we don't have that. We are your neighbors. You do see us running around. We haven't seen and we got a few emails, but you know, we didn't get the threats that you're seeing, the anger and angst that people have about the election results. We test every combination of votes before the election, and we have a precinct election audit after the election. And they randomly pick a precinct. And fingers crossed, I always hope they don't pick our absentee precinct, because you hand count those. You hand count the top of the ballot. So you hand count either president or governor. And so those are the 2 things you hand count. Now, it'd only be 2,000, the first 2,000 ballots for us, but all 99 counties do this. We just did it for our special election. We had a special election on Tuesday. They picked the precincts 120. You hand counted those ballots. And it's not me hand counting, it's not my staff. It's, you know, to be very blunt, we hire a Republican, we hire a Democrat. And they do it right there. And they put them in piles, they count them, and we've never had it be off. I don't know of any county that's been off on that. So that puts a lot of people at ease when you explain that process. You know, the stuff we hear are, oh, you guys use those poll pads. Well, I want to be very clear about it. Those iPads you see at the polling sites for our poll workers, Valerie's been one, I think Rosie and Paul. We were forced into that. I liked the paper. You know, I liked when you said my last name's Fitzgerald, and everyone in every book was looking for you. I liked that. Yes. But the problem with that was the law changed in 2017 that said, if I do it that way, everyone that makes a change to the polling site is a provisional ballot. And those ballots for the 2018 election, a provisional ballot is one that goes in an envelope. It is probably going to be counted if you follow the law, if you follow the rules. But if you didn't, then you're going to get a letter. But the psyche for people not being able to put it in the machine forced me to get the poll pads. And we love what we have. It treats every voter the same. You go in, no one's treated any differently, but it's expensive. And everything's connected with Bluetooth. So I'm not a big technology guy, but it's hard to hack into Apple, if not impossible. And all we're doing, the only thing that's connected to the internet is the printer, to print from one to the other. So we do get a little bit of pushback on that, because they think everything's connected to the internet because they can see it. Well, just because you can see it doesn't mean that you can get into it. We have the long, and again, I'm getting into the deep water. There's a 12-digit for your cell phone. We have a 15-digit for ours. So it's a lot harder than people think. But we were forced into it, but we wouldn't go back. I think it's a way to treat everybody the same. But you know, doubling back in a long version of this, Mike, is we're not having the problems other places are having because we do everything open. And you know, there's 20 Democratic county auditors. The rest are either no party or Republican, and we're all the same. We all treat elections the same. You know, in our world, we don't want close races, we want blowouts. But if it's a close race, we've had races that we picked out of a hat. In fact, they had one in Osceola in 2021. We've had 2 votes, 1 vote, we've had everything and in between. And we always turn out the same because we spend a lot of time on the front end testing to make sure things work. The one thing I didn't get into is they changed the ballot, how it looks for everybody. It used to be if you were a Republican county auditor, Republicans went first. If you're a Democrat county auditor, Democrats went first. Now, to be fair, they haven't changed. So we're in a cadence where in 2020, Republicans were on top for Polk County. In 2022, Democrats will be on top. And then 2024, Democrats will be on top again. And then 2026, Republicans will be on top. I don't know if that means anything to anybody. I assume everyone looks at their ballot effectively and judges people, but if you're the person who votes on the first person on the ballot, surprise.
Other questions?
So back to this thing about the satellite voting, is the problem that you have because you have only your own paid staff that can staff those events?
Well, we don't have volunteers do anything for us.
Okay.
Because when you start having volunteers, you start having a volunteer mentality that I'm done with this, I'm not doing it this way. So we pay people. So everything we do is paid. And we did budget a little bit more, but we used to do them for 3 weeks. And we did a few for this last special election. We did them on Saturdays to try to see how they go. There were some successes, some not successful.
I want to ask about the ID requirements. I understand that there's supposed to be a specific little tag on the ID in order for it to be a valid ID to be shown at an election. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So when it comes to voter ID, there are things you can use to vote with. Most people are going to use driver's license. Even the driver's license as temporary can be used. Now, we prefer those because we can scan those in. And anyone that's come to the polling site or to our office, we scan them in. It doesn't bring up how much you weigh or anything like that. We just get up where you live, and we always confirm that where you live. Now, you can use a lot of other things. You can use if your school has an expiration date on it, you can use that. You can use a passport. You can use an employer ID if it has an expiration date. So there are a number of things you can do. Or you can bring somebody that knows you. If you just move to apartment 1, you know the person in apartment 2, they can come and vouch for you. But we prefer the one that has the bar scan, but it's not required.
Out of curiosity, I'm kind of worried about a little security, and I'm going to point out it had to be about 20, 25 years ago. I was poll watcher, my son was poll watcher with me, and my son's not much bigger than me, but the women who were handling the election room and I were being harassed are very big, burly guy, about 8:30 at night, and I just kind of leaned out and whistled for my son because he was watching the streets, and he came in, the guy saw another guy and left. Thank God. Now with today, we're worried about people who walk around with guns who have nothing else to do but shoot. And I was thinking, I don't know if I want to be a poll watcher. It's sad to say, but have you thought about that?
We constantly think about every scenario we can. Without getting too far in the weeds, we have contact with the sheriff's office at all given time. I have a sheriff's deputy assigned to me every election. And the one good thing about social media is you hear about it a lot. If there's something somebody sees, and we always ask, you probably see me on TV say, if you see something you're not comfortable with, you have to let us know. I can't be 176 places, but your eyes and ears can. And if we're to a point where you feel threatened, we want you to call us, because we will send people out. Now, usually it starts out with one of my staffers, one of my personal staff will go out. They do elections 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. For a lot of times, you probably met with Steve. Steve will go out and chase away whoever's out there. If I have to go out there, somebody's going to jail. Because I bring the sheriff's deputy with me. You've already dealt with my staff. You've already been on the phone with us. If you're gonna make that a problem, then we have the ability to remove you from the polling site. We haven't had that. We haven't had the gun issue come up a whole lot. We did have in 2020 the mask issue come up a lot because during the primary and the general, Polk County had a mask mandate for Polk County. So to come in our building, you had to wear a mask. And some people didn't like that, but that was the rules for Polk County. Supervisors passed it, we adhere to it. I don't get a chance to say, I don't believe in you. At the polling sites, that wasn't required because we couldn't require it on election day. And that caused people a lot of grief. So we did deal with something similar where people were very upset, but there's certain things we can do and we can't do. But if there's a problem at the polling site, we can fix those election day. We need to know about them right away. Telling us, a few weeks later, we're not gonna be able to fix that. It always happens. I'll hear, well, I was in the polling site, I didn't feel comfortable. Well, the polling site a year ago? Yeah. Well, so we ask you to call, and I know Valerie, I know you'll call. So if there's if you see anything, that makes you feel uncomfortable, even if our poll workers are not making you feel comfortable, let me know.
Jimmy, we have a question from online. Are other county auditors offering this kind of informational session for their voters?
So I've talked to a lot of county auditors. We're a little more blessed here in Polk County because we have a lot of groups. We've got Democratic groups, we've got Republican groups, we have Interfaith Alliance. We have the Kiwanis, a lot of these groups don't have that. So that's where you're seeing some of the problems in Northwest Iowa. I assume every county auditor is reaching out saying, here's the new laws. I'd be disappointed if they weren't, but you gotta remember, some of these people also are doing your deeds, they're answering the phone, they're a staff of 2. And if a part-time person's gone, they're a staff of 1. I have 50 employees, so I can go out in the community and do this. And we do offer it for other communities. If you call your county auditor and they say, I don't have time, I'm happy to do it, I'm happy to do Zooms. Because the laws are the laws. So the laws aren't different here than they are in Madison County or Adair County. And I have been to other counties, mainly on a partisan level, to speak about the laws. But if your county auditor decides they don't want to do it, I'm happy to do it for them.
So you spoke about the effect the laws are going to have possibly on rural, urban, on age differences. I'm wondering if you have any either data or predictions about what effect it might have on other demographics, socioeconomic, racial, and so on.
That's a great question. We've had elections where you have to be really dialed in to go vote. A lot of people don't know city council elections going on because there's not a lot of people door knocking. The special elections, I had family that didn't know there was a special election in urban. And they live in urban. So when you start looking at people that aren't dialed in, you're looking at the people that are working 2 jobs. And we're in the punishment phase of this bill now. You miss this election, you're going inactive. Now inactive, let me be clear, you're not falling off the voter rolls, but you're starting the process pretty quickly. So the rules are you don't vote the last 2 general elections, you go inactive. Now you're inactive and you miss the next 2, you're off. And they proactively did it in 2020, which affected a lot of people that were COVID worried. If you have cancer, if you have a pre-existing, you're not going to the polling site. You're just not. So we asked you to do curbside voting, and some people aren't even comfortable doing that. So it is going to affect, and it's going to be interesting to see how it affects people, because the 294,000 this was a record turnout. You got to remember, 2020 was a record turnout. We were about 85% in Polk County. That means 15% were going down right away. And some of the parties went out and tried to get those folks re-registered. And you can re-register anytime. You can ask for an absentee ballot, you can go to the polls, you can call our office. There's a lot of things you can do. You can go online. But the marginally affected folks are going to be affected. The ones that are on the margin are going to be affected far greater. And I can tell you a personal story. those of us that look a little different than our driver's license like to keep that picture. So I had a picture where I had dark hair, everything was dark. You know, for what I looked like, it was pretty good for me. Well, it expired, I didn't know. I received a voter PIN card in the mail, automatic. So of course I take it and I'm mad at the office on who sent me this. Why are you testing something? What am I missing? Well, I got it because I was an active voter and my driver's license expired. So I've replaced that picture with this one. Very disappointed. But if you're inactive, that doesn't happen to you. So think of apartment folks. I have one of my children live in an apartment and she moves every couple of years. So the last thing young people do is look at the mail. And they just don't. They don't go to the mailbox like we do. And so this is going to affect them as well. So you're going to see, and when you get to the deadlines, you're going to see it affect rural areas a lot more. They have to, their mail goes from them to Des Moines, Waterloo, to us, and then back. That causes a pretty big difference in delivery times. Our 2 days is 3 days then. Which again, you say, oh, it's only 1 day. Well, if it's your vote, I'd be mad. And there's really no reason to get away from the postmark or the intelligent mail, because I'm required to put intelligent mail on your absentee ballot anyway, because we have overseas voters. The overseas voters start voting 45 days in advance. We start voting 20 days in advance. And then we have Safe at Home, which is a great program for those people that have been in an abusive situation, that may have a ex-spouse that's tracking them. This gives them an address they can use. I don't know who they are, but they go through the Secretary of State's office for not just voting, but for their mail. That way they're not tracked and stolen. And we use it for that as well.
Back to the question I had before, who's asking who your registered or your delivery agent is, or if you are a household member to be able to take somebody's ballot in?
It's a great question. The law doesn't say we have to ask anybody. So, you know, we don't, in the Secretary of State's office, I mean, I just don't know how I'm gonna know who you're related to.
Right.
I mean, I know a lot of you in here, but I don't know who's all in your house.
Your neighbor's dog or something.
But if you're bringing a stack like this, then I assume we have a problem. If you're bringing a couple, you know, we're not gonna say a whole lot, but we always ask you to use the drop box. The only person that can't use the drop box is the delivery agent. If you're a delivery agent, and again, that I want to explain who that can't be. Employer, agent of the employer, political party, implied otherwise campaign, Democratic, Republican Party, or an agent of your union. So pretty much no one that you know can use it. Now, the only people that can use delivery agents that I skipped over are those that are disabled or blind. Disabled hasn't been put in the administrative rules yet, so I don't know what a disability is. For some of us, you may have a drinking disability. For others, it may be a mental health disability. So until they define it, we're going with what we know. So it'll be interesting in the next few weeks to see if they do some definitions for us.
Hi. So we have restrictions on who can deliver an absentee ballot. Are there restrictions on who can deliver an absentee ballot request?
There are no restrictions on absentee ballot requests at this point, other than you turn it in within 72 hours. You know, the one thing that everybody's been pretty good about that, but just make sure when you're helping people that they fill everything out properly, because you're going to bring it to our office. My staff's probably not going to be the most excited about that, but they're going to call them and try to get it remedied. But the one thing we found is if it's not remedied the first time, it's tough to get it done the second time.
Can congregations and pastors collect ballots?
We recommend no one collects ballots. The voter should bring their ballots in. They should put in the mailbox if they want. They should use our drop box. We wouldn't recommend any congregation compiles them all together. We think that might be a violation of the law.
Can a pastor be an agent?
As long as he's not in the union, or she, I'm sorry, as long as they You are not in the union, not your employer,
Okay,
or not affected with any campaign issue or anything like that.
thank you.
Help me to thank Jamie Fitzgerald. I know we have a couple more questions, so I'm sure that Jamie might stick around for a couple minutes, so feel free. And thank you so much for being here, both in person and online. My apologies again for our technical issues. It is the world that we live in at the moment. Crossroads is a monthly luncheon, and last time I suggested that we may be talking about abortion this time. We actually are going to talk about abortion next time. So Mrs. Stillwell, who is the new political director at Planned Parenthood, will be joining us, so I hope you will return. If you have made a reservation, make sure if you want lunch that you indicate that when you make your reservation, because we are not having obviously extras, and you pay for that at the time. And if you obviously also are free to just come and bring your own lunch as well. So thank you so much for being with us. Take care.